Good morning. I want to thank everybody who joins us. Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform starts its operation, and my name is Olga Otomanova, and it's year 9 of the war and day 279 of our fight for freedom. Our brief schedule prepared by our team for today is as follows. At 1300 we will have Dmitro Novitsky joins us in this studio. He's the president of the Ukrinform Ecology Association, and we will be talking about the consequences of Russian shellings for infrastructure of the association and the plan for restoration of the damaged facilities. At 1400 we will have Olga Trofimtsev joining us. She's the ambassador for White, and we will talk about the initiative Grain for Ukraine and the coordination of the exporters at Investors Council. Oh, I'm sorry, it will be at 1330, and at 1400 we will have Serhii Koyun, director of A95 Consulting Group, join us in this studio, and we will be talking about the prospects of the fuel market of Ukraine. And joining us right now is Serhii Khlan, deputy of Kherson Regional Council. Good morning, Mr. Serhii. Good morning. Kherson is Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes, Mr. Serhii. The occupiers keep incessantly shelling Kherson and Kherson region. What is the situation as of now? Yes, indeed, the occupiers continue the bombardments of Kherson and the right bank of Kherson region. Absolutely all the towns along the bank of the Dnipro River are being bombarded. I mean, Berislav, Tokarivka, all of them that lie along the banks of Dnipro. Also, they bombard Kherson and all the towns and villages adjacent to those areas. The bombardment is conducted not only by MLRS but also by mortars, since the distance across the Dnipro River is not so long. So the occupiers bombard the city with small fire teams. But fortunately, within the last day, we had no injured or casualties. The bombardments are still on, but the last day passed without casualties. The occupiers inflict strikes on the critical infrastructure. There were more strikes on the power lines, but the occupiers try to destroy it still. So now there are Oblenergo teams working on resumption of the power supply to Kherson city, because Kherson started getting power recently in some of its districts. For the time being, the critical infrastructure is already reconnected, however, not in full. The hospitals got reconnected to the power grid. Unfortunately, we're still unable to provide the water supply, but the internet started emerging across some of the districts of the cities, so we can say that the life is coming back to the city, notwithstanding the criminal bombardments by the enemy. Still in the view of the threat posed by the shellings of the occupiers, there are evacuation routes by railway to Khmelnytsky organized by the government, which can be used by the inhabitants of the city. And now there are additional carriages organized for this train. There is also evacuation organized by bus routes, and also there are charity organizations involved in this process who organize evacuation tours. Everybody who wishes to evacuate are being supported by the government by 2,000 hryvnias to those capable, and for persons with a limited mobility, are provided with 3,000 hryvnias. We understand that this amount is quite small, but still for the inhabitants of Kherson and for the towns along the right bank of the Dnipro River, it's advised to use those evacuation routes. Who refuse to evacuate, we advise to be careful with the signals of air raid alerts. It's still not being worked out properly because the time between the alert and the actual bombardment is pretty short. So everybody is advised to stay close to the shelter where they can find cover from the shelling. Mr. Serhii, talking about the power supply in absolute numbers, how many consumers, or at least in percentage, how many consumers already got reconnected to the grid? We can say about 20% of the consumers reconnected in Kherson city. And we can say about the reconnection of the critical infrastructure, however, not all of it. So it's 20% of reconnection of Kherson in general. What about the situation in the occupied territories? There is information that in Skadovsk, the Russians capture the real estate of our citizens. We have reports about such facts. What's going on there and what's going on in Kakhovka, Nova Kakhovka? What's the situation over there? The occupiers bring the FSB personnel to Kakhovka and Nova Kakhovka. The military personnel decreased. There are only observation posts left. The military observation posts in the distance of 15 kilometers to the Dnipro bank. So the main forces are withdrawn to 15 to 20 kilometers in the depth of Kherson region. However, the material and the observation posts are still present across the Dnipro river bank. Still, we observe the increase in number of FSB personnel, and they come mostly from Dagestan Republic of Russia. It's the Dagestan units of FSB coming to Kherson region, which may indicate the increase of the filtration pressure in the same way that it was happening in Kherson previously, where the occupiers announced forced evacuation from Oleshki and Kakhovka and Nova Kakhovka. The majority of population refused to evacuate in that way, and they stayed in their homes. So in my opinion, the increase in this personnel from Dagestan is aimed at increase of pressure on those people who want to stay in their homes, to have them leave, to evict them from their homes to the areas that where Russians offer so-called forcible evacuation. And in that case, they're talking about the sanatoriums in Henichesk region and Skadovsk region, and further on, the Russians, just like in Kherson, will deport people to Russian Federation, to the distant regions of Russian Federation, just as it was happening in Kherson, where people ended up in Khanty-Mansiysk region or Kamchatka Peninsula. So for what I understand, the occupiers will continue the same kind of deportation pressure in the left bank of Kherson region. We know that there are already identified torture sites where occupiers tortured our people. What do people report about the crimes committed by Russians in Kherson or Kherson region? Yes, every day there are more and more shocking facts of tortures and execution of our people when right bank of Kherson region was under occupation. there are more victims who were tortured to death or executed even at their private houses. All those crimes are documented. There are criminal cases opened by national police and documented by national police. All of these Russian Federation crimes are registered. The torture sites already identified are already visited by Human Rights Commissioner Dmitro Lubinets, and he officially reported and provided information about the facts of the torture, about the conditions of the detainment, where there were cells for men and women detained together in the same cells, and there are separate cells for the children below 18 years. So we will have more facts disclosed about such war crimes by Russian Federation, but still there's a lot of work to be done in terms of the occupation of Kherson region, and we will see more of such crimes in the left bank of Kherson region, because we keep receiving reports about kidnapping the people for their unwillingness to succumb to the occupation governments, and these criminal detainments are still going on. The torturing is still going on. Unfortunately, these are the things still happening in the left bank of Kherson region. Dear colleagues, your questions, please. Irina Mamchur, Ukrinform. First, regarding the repair of the waterway going through Kherson region to Mykolaiv. These days, yesterday or the day before, there was information that the Russians bombarded the repaired part of this waterway, and the supply of water to Mykolaiv that was about to happen is being postponed for infinite time. Do you have any information regarding the repair of this infrastructure object? Are there any terms, or was that sector destroyed or damaged just 2 days ago? Was it repaired already, and how would it happen if the enemy will keep bombarding the same sectors of the waterway on a daily basis? Yes, the situation with the waterway is pretty complicated. It was already completely repaired, but the occupier targeted the pump station and made it impossible to supply water to Mykolaiv. The works are still in progress to resume to repair this pump station and to resume its operation, but we have to understand that the enemy will keep inflicting damage on such facilities just in the way that they damage the power transportation lines. We repaired it recently, and the occupiers targeted it again, and the same story is with this waterway to Mykolaiv. So now the works are in progress on repairing the pump station. I hope it will be restored soon, and there is a question of protection of this pump station, just in the same way that it's a challenge for defense of all the critical infrastructure, not only about the waterway to Mykolaiv, but in general it's a big challenge for Ukraine. And the plan is to provide safety and security to all the critical infrastructure, and I think it will be done eventually. Another question from your words, there was information that the Russians bring their adherents and collaborationists from Kakhovka and Novakakhovka. Is this information how true is that, and what can it witness about? Well, it's true. The occupiers and collaborationists withdrew their administrations and so-called governments from Kakhovka and Novakakhovka, and it happened about 2 weeks ago. All the adherents and those who were working with the collaborationists, they were brought out of Kakhovka and Nova Kakhovka to Henichsk. They identified Henichsk as the center of occupational region, as the center of occupational government. And now all the collaborationists are based there. It doesn't mean that they left completely, because the presence of the military in Kakhovka and Nova Kakhovka, as I mentioned, is being reinforced with FSB, and the pressure is increasing from FSB, so they left under the framework of this so-called evacuation, and they are currently based in Henichsk. More questions, please?
Thank you, sir. Lorenzo Cremonesi from Corriere della Sera from Italia, Milano. Sir, two questions. Few days ago, you told us that there were left about 80,000 people in Kherson. First of all, is it all the region or only city? And secondly, due to the recent evacuation in the last days because of the bombardments, do you have any assessment how many people are there? Thank you. And I have a second question, but better to...
Пане Сергію, ви з нами? Один, два. Пане Сергію.
We're trying to reestablish connection. Our technical team is working to eliminate the issues. I will remind you, we're having Serhii Khlan joining us, the deputy of the Kherson Regional Council. We will try to get him reconnected. There are problems with the power supply and communication, unfortunately. Our speaker is coming back, and we're about to continue. Mr. Serhii, 1, 2. I'm hearing you. I'm sorry the lights went off, but I got reconnected. How do you read me? We don't see you, but we're hearing you. We're having a question. We will repeat it right now. Mr. Lorenzo, can you please repeat your question?
Again, Lorenzo Cremonesi from Corriere della Sera, Italia. Sir, two questions. I will ask you the first one. A few days ago, you told us there were about 80,000 people left in Kherson. I'd like to know if it's Kherson region, including all the villages around, along the river, etc., or only the city. And secondly, through the fact that many people left, as you say, that we know in the last few days because of the Russian bombing, any assessment how many people are still there? This is the first question. Then I have another one.
I was meaning Kherson city itself, the administrative unit. Before the war, it was 320,000 in Kherson in general. Now the last estimate is 80,000 after the occupation of the city. Now we see that there is outflow of people from Kherson. Part of the people are going out of Kherson. Part of the people who were going to come back to Kherson, they're not coming back in mass. There are cases when people come back just to check on their dwellings, just to check on their homes, and then coming back to the regions where they are currently temporarily located. In view of this threat of shellings from the left bank of the Dnipro River by Russian troops, So we can say that the number of population in Kherson decreases in view of the evacuation from Kherson. And talking about the number of the people who left, well, it's quite insignificant number, because this evacuation, which is announced now by both government and charity organizations, it was not so long in progress, and this is why I was saying that the number of the carriages in the evacuation trains is being added, and the number of bus evacuation routes grows, and support of all these charity organizations in terms of evacuation grows.
You mentioned the East Bank. Of course, everybody from a military point of view is looking what's happening in the East Bank of the Dnipro. Sir, do you have indication of military operation by Ukrainian forces in that area? Are they operating, I mean, physically with soldiers on the east side? Because we hear a lot of rumors, but we don't have any official declaration. Can you confirm there are Ukrainian soldiers operating on the east side of the Dnipro in the Kherson region? Thank you.
Mr. Serhii, are you still with us? 1, 2. I've heard the question quite bad. About the Ukrainian troops in the left bank of Dnipro River. Well, I think that this information should better be taken from the official sources about the presence of Ukrainian troops in the left bank. Mr. Serhii? 1, 2. Well, unfortunately, the communication is breaking down. The lights went off on our speakers end, so we will wrap up our briefing. I will remind you we had Serhii Khlan, the Deputy of Kherson Regional Council, joining up. Dear colleagues, our next briefing is at 1300, and we will talk about the restoration of our infrastructure. Joining us in this studio will be Dmitro Novitsky, President of the Ukrinform Canal Ecology Association, so bear with us.